I have an open question for the distinguished denizens of that august institution known as the mainstream corporate news media. And the question is this: do you really not understand why they call you fake news? I mean, really? The reason I pose the question this evening is because, as you may have heard by now, Mr. Paul Pelosi, the husband of the Speaker of the House, the third gentleman of the United States, if you wish, he got his face bashed in with a hammer the other night by an intruder who, according to our best current understanding, is a Canadian illegal alien homeless nudist drug addict who lives part-time in Berkeley in an abandoned school bus festooned with weed flags and Black Lives Matter stickers that sits parked outside a house that the neighbors refer to as the hippie commune. Now, if you're a reasonable man or woman who can tell your ass from a hole in the ground, as I know you are, you might find yourself saying, based on that description, that Paul Pelosi's alleged assailant doesn't sound all that much like a radicalized right-wing ultra-MAGA January 6th insurrectionist. But you only think that because you don't suffer from the crippling mental illness known as being a professional journalist. If you were a professional journalist, if you did suffer from that affliction, with your fancy Ivy League degree and your fancy seven-figure salary and your tastefully appointed penthouse on the Upper West Side, well, you would know certain facts about the world, like the Orange Man is bad, the Orange Man is bad, and if any act of political violence occurs, no matter who commits it or against whom or why or where, it happened because the Orange Man is bad. And we're being told, of course, that this was a targeted home invasion perpetrated by the suspect, Mr. DePape. I know a lot of people are calling him Mr. DePape or some shit like that, but that sounds really incredibly dumb, so I'm gonna stay with DePape. We're told Mr. DePape broke and entered through a locked French door in the back of the residence, and we're told that when the San Francisco PD arrived on the scene, they observed Mr. Pelosi and Mr. DePape struggling over a hammer, both clad in their underwear. Now, go ahead and call me a conspiracy theorist if you must, but I get a distinct feeling like there is some crucial expository information missing from this narrative. Like, if you're heading out on a 46-degree evening to go cause harm to one of the nation's top political leaders, do you go out and do it in nothing but your Fruit of the Looms? Look, I know the guy's supposed to be a nudist and everything, but 46 degrees, that's all I'm saying. Of course, if I was in the mood for hurling tasteless accusations, a thing I would never do, but if I did, I might say something like, doggone it, I'm old enough to remember in America where you could discreetly hire a male prostitute without getting your face bashed in with a hammer. Or alternately, I might say something like, you know, I hate it when I order feisty middle-aged Canadian male nudist on my Pimp Dash app and they send me some psychopath with a carpentry fetish. Or alternately, I could say, hell, if I was married to Nancy Pelosi, I would have turned gay a lot sooner than that. You know what? This episode, this entire thing threatens to turn into a giant wall of Pelosi jokes. So I guess let's just dispense with the music. Jim Eagle, are you awake over there? You magnificent feathered bastard. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where we love getting hammered almost as much as Polly P. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. Tonight is Halloween, as you may know, the one magical night of the year when childless adults who spend all their time watching cartoons and reading comic books can let their hair down and pretend to be kids for a change. Now, somebody asked me earlier today whether I'll be passing out candy tonight, and I said, hell no, I won't. I have earned the right to be retired from that crap. My kids are grown. I have no grandkids as yet, so I need Halloween about as much as Hunter Biden needs a bigger cocaine budget. Besides, the last couple times I performed the candy duty on Halloween, the kids were so damn rude I had to restrain myself from slapping at least a half a dozen of the little shits. And why, yes, my name is Curmudgeon, and I do have a legend to uphold. Thank you very much. So all you churlish little buffoons can get right the hell up off my lawn. I think that's about enough Halloween stuff, frankly. And besides, these other Pelosi jokes are not going to tell themselves. And yes, I can hear the more squeamish among you saying, geez, shouldn't we not be making jokes about a guy who just got his face bashed in with a hammer? And to that, I can only say, yes, we probably shouldn't, but damn it, we're going to anyway. because we are just that morally depraved, and we love ourselves for it. We are MAGA Squad, we are Legion, resistance is futile. And you know, if I was Mr. Pelosi, I think I would be rather deeply offended by the implication that I would ever order a male prostitute who is a right-wing extremist. And again, we should restate that there is nothing in the available evidence to indicate that this is any sort of male prostitute encounter gone bad. I mean, you can ask any cop, and they will tell you that there's a wide variety of explanations why you might enter a residence at 2:30 in the morning on a Saturday and find two men in their underwear struggling in a bedroom that don't have anything to do with sexual activity. But look, irrespective of what the real circumstances are, whether it was an intimate encounter gone horribly sideways or just a typical case of random home invasion on a 46-degree evening by a man wearing only his skivvies, I think it's shameful that the extremist right-wing media would be denying their culpability when it's so obvious that Donald Trump, Ben Shapiro, and Tucker Carlson might as well all have been holding the hammer together. And further shame on them for their damnable lies about the media Democrat industrial complex, bearing any sort of culpability whatsoever for the toxic state of the public discourse, and accusing Democrat office holders of having openly incited acts of violence just because they openly incited acts of violence. It's just this sort of dangerous toxicity that impelled President and semi-animated cadaver Joe Biden to stand bathed in blood red light in front of Independence Hall, shaking his fists, veins bulging, and calmly explaining that people who didn't vote for him are an existential threat to the survival of the Republic, and they probably should be rounded up and thrown in camps just to be safe. And barring that, the least we can do is make sure they're never allowed to talk on the internet again, right? Oh, speaking of the internet, since the last time we saw each other, the Twitter is under new management, and the whole thing went a lot like the 2004 presidential election did. A lot of dumb people got really upset and threatened to move to Canada, and they maintained their resolve for a good 5.5, 6 hours. Some of them are still going, though, as I understand it, just hammering out tweet after tweet after tweet about how terrible it is having to tweet in a world where a guy bought the website you're tweeting on from another guy. Because, as we have discussed at fairly great length before, a guy buying a website, that is an earth-shaking event, an event that potentially could destabilize the entire globe and cause the very ruin of human civilization itself. A man has bought a website, the whole purpose of which is people saying words to each other, and he wants to let them say whatever words they want? So, the dude is obviously a madman and a lunatic. Democracy can only survive if the critics of the regime are brutally silenced. Counter-revolutionary activity can never be tolerated. Did you hear how the cops originally said they were let into the Pelosi house by an unknown third person? And then they kind of walked back that claim. Now, if I was willing to engage in implicit hypotheticals for comedic purposes, which I totally am, I might theorize that the third individual was also an illegal alien, but an illegal alien from Mexico instead of Canada, because I have it on good authority that in the San Francisco octogenarian gay when my wife's away prostitute scene, they apparently call that doing the NAFTA. And it's quite a pricey selection, only available to very well-heeled clients, I hear. Again, I would never suggest such a thing, but other people have said that. Also, we should probably place our wagers on the odds of Mr. DePape leaving the county jail alive. It's strange because I thought these Democrat cities were all about no cash bail and turning violent criminals back out on the street as quickly as possible. You know, because racism. Hell, if DePape had popped in on some other 83-year-old guy, someone not connected to a prominent local and national politician, and bashed his face in with a hammer, do we have any reason to doubt that he'd already be safe and sound back in his abandoned school bus outside the house where his ex-girlfriend lives with the guy who cuckolded him? Because that's a healthy domestic situation, right? I'm sure glad these visionary progressives have moved on from the evils of the traditional Western nuclear family values, because they are obviously much happier this way. Who needs an archaic institution like marriage when you can sleep in a short bus in a front yard while listening to yourself get cuckolded as you cry yourself to sleep each night, wondering why you ever left freaking Saskatchewan? Oh, speaking of things that only matter in Canada, The NHL was in the news last week because the NHL has announced the scandalous discovery that hockey is played mostly by white people from cold weather climates. And it really makes you wonder how these guys could have been asleep at the switch for all these years. If there is anything we know about the world, it's that when a group of people are in a place doing a thing and they are all white, that means something racist is going on. So you tell me what it means, Mr. Purist, Mr. Colorblind, when you got a white sheet of ice, 2 white centers, 4 white wingers, 4 white defense persons, 2 white goalkeepers, 2 white referees, and 2 white linesmen. Linespersons. Sorry again. I'll tell you what you've got. You've got a goddamn racist conspiracy. The only thing missing in this sea of lily whiteness, frankly, is the white hoods. In fact, most people don't know this, but NHL actually stands for National Honky League. So I'm pleased to see that Commissioner Gary Bettman and his team of visionaries at the league office are taking the long overdue first steps toward cleaning up the sport of hockey and making it not quite so disgustingly Caucasian. We can only hope that this is a much needed first step towards de-whitifying a whole host of other obviously racist winter sports. Maybe I will live long enough to see that mythical day when we have a curling champion from Compton, when the world's greatest ski jumper comes from East St. Louis, when New Orleans is the world capital of bobsledding, and the Stanley Cup is being hoisted by the Harlem Globeskatters. You know, I think it's important that we have a national conversation about the root causes of hammer attacks by gay prostitutes. Sorry, I mean random home invaders. I think I just had a teleprompter glitch or something. I mean, after all, a hammer can be a weapon of war, right? Just ask Thor, the god of thunder. Just ask Lady Thor, also known as Natalie Portman with stupid CGI arms. They will tell you. So do there really need to be weapons of war lying about in the average American household? I say no. I say we're long overdue for common sense hammer reform. It's about time we stood up to the hammer lobby, stood up to their lobbyists and their dark money and said, no more. We won't watch another old man's face get sacrificed on the altar of your desire for profit. Oh, and something else happened while I was away. They had the Pennsylvania Senate debate. And it went just about like we imagined it would, with Fetterman doing his best impression of Mongo from Blazing Saddles. But to be fair, I think he probably could punch out a horse. But I discovered something when I was watching the highlights, such as they are, of that cringe-inducing spectacle. Because I think we've actually had John Fetterman wrong this whole time. I think he's operating in an artistic idiom that has been beyond our feeble comprehension up until now. This guy isn't an incoherent stroke victim. He's a slam poet. I support fracking. I support fracking. I stand. And I support fracking. When you take the words and put them on the page, only then does one realize he is operating at a level of intellectual depth and profundity that is far beyond the comprehension of lowly simpletons like you and me. The Senate is not where this man belongs. He belongs on the college coffeehouse slam poetry circuit. I bet he could win every slam poetry contest on the eastern seaboard. He's got all the affectations down and everything. You know how he randomly shouts certain words every so often? It's pure slam poetry, pure genius. Get this guy a record deal pronto, because he could be the next Henry Rollins. But he's going to need a lot more shitty tattoos. Oh, and if you thought this episode had already reached its nadir of tastelessness, you're about to not think that anymore. Because I've got this too. Paulie and David sitting in a tree. H-A-M-M-E-R-I-N-G. First comes coitus, then comes payment, then comes your face needing new underlayment. And look, I know I shouldn't be this hard on Mr. Pelosi. I know how difficult it can be when your wife goes out of town on business. When Lady Curmudgeon goes on trips for work, I have to remember to feed the cats. But they don't bash my face in with a hammer if I forget, so there's that. And I don't normally get drunk and crash my car and try to get out of trouble by showing the cops my donor card for the local police union either. You know, speaking of that, wasn't there a mystery passenger in Mr. Pelosi's car on the night of his DUI crash whose identity remains a mystery? Wouldn't it give this story a wonderful sort of full circle symmetry if the mystery passenger wound up being our good friend Mr. DePape? And speaking of symmetry, What a powerful bit of irony that the Democrats' immigration chickens should come home to roost in the form of an Anglo-French illegal alien from Canada. You almost couldn't write it better if you tried, but maybe I've got this thing all wrong. Joe Biden thinks I've got it all wrong. Joe Biden says DePape was chanting the same slogan as the January 6th insurrectionists. Because the experts all agree, if you shout the words, "Where's Nancy?" that means you're a right-wing extremist election denier who wants to overthrow the government and install the guy with the furry horn helmet as emperor for life. Even if your name is Nancy, you don't get a free pass. But as long as we're going down that road, since the president says Paul Pelosi's gay prostitute, random home invader, was chanting the same awful slogan as the vile democracy haters of January 6th, then I think it's only proper, and I am sure you will agree, that the January 6th committee should add this incident to the scope of its investigation. I say issue subpoenas to Mr. Pelosi and Mr. DePape without delay, because either one of them could have important information about the worst assault on our democracy since Pearl Harbor had a bastard love child with 9/11 and they named it Charlottesville. And I'm all out of jokes now, so I think I'm going to take my leave and go get to the real task of this evening, which is ignoring all the kids who come to the door expecting free goodies. But I will be watching out the window like a hawk, and if one of the little bastards sets a foot wrong and makes the mistake of treading on my grass, you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Do not comply, and please kindly get the hell off my lawn.